The first thing Adrian Vale heard was not the orchestra, the applause, or his fiancée calling his name from beneath the chandeliers. It was a woman crying behind the service doors. The sound was faint, almost swallowed by the music, but it came again, sharper this time. "Please, somebody help me." Adrian stopped in the middle of the corridor. A silver serving cart stood crooked near the pantry entrance, one wheel still turning. Beside it, 29-year-old Nia Brooks, the black maid who had worked quietly in his mansion for nearly a year, was sitting on the marble floor. One wrist was locked to the cart with a steel handcuff. Her lavender uniform was torn at the sleeve, and a tray of champagne glasses lay shattered beside her. But it was not the handcuff that made Adrian's blood run cold. It was the diamond bracelet sitting on the top shelf of the cart. The same bracelet his fiancée, Celeste, had been screaming about 10 minutes earlier. The bracelet everyone believed Nia had stolen. "Nia!" Adrian dropped beside her. "Who did this?" Her eyes lifted to his, terrified but steady. "Your fiancée," she whispered. "She put the bracelet there. She said when security found me, no one would believe a maid over the future Mrs. Vale." Adrian stared at her, unable to speak. From the ballroom, Celeste's voice floated through the open doors, sweet and polished as she welcomed 200 guests to their engagement celebration. Nia gripped the edge of the cart. "That isn't the worst part," she said. "Before she locked me here, I heard her talking to someone in your father's study." Adrian's hand froze over the cuff. "What did you hear?" Nia looked toward the ballroom, where Celeste had just begun raising a glass in his honor. "She isn't planning to marry you," Nia whispered. "She's planning to take everything before sunrise." And then every light across the mansion suddenly went out. 10 hours before the mansion went dark, Nia Brooks stood alone in the Vale Estate's East Ballroom, polishing fingerprints from a silver serving cart no guest would ever notice. Morning light spilled through the 20-foot windows, turning the marble floor pale gold. Florists moved between towering arrangements of white roses. Caterers carried crystal glasses toward tables dressed in ivory linen. By evening, 200 guests would fill the room to celebrate Adrian Vale's engagement to Celeste Laurent, the daughter of one of New York's most powerful investment families. To everyone attending, it would look like a perfect union. Nia had already seen enough to know perfection was usually the most carefully rehearsed lie in the room. She was 29 with dark brown skin, watchful eyes, and natural curls pinned into a neat bun beneath her maid's headband. Her lavender uniform had been freshly pressed, though the cuff near her left wrist was beginning to fray. She had been saving for a replacement instead of asking the estate manager for one. Every spare dollar mattered now. Her younger sister, Simone, needed surgery within 6 weeks. The hospital had agreed to delay the deposit twice. They would not delay it again. That was why Nia had accepted every extra shift Celeste demanded, even when those demands had little to do with work. "Nia!" Celeste's voice sliced through the ballroom. She descended the grand staircase in a silk robe, followed by her personal assistant, Mara, who carried a tablet and 3 garment bags. Even without makeup, Celeste looked camera-ready, blonde hair smooth, posture perfect, diamond bracelet gleaming around her wrist. She stopped beside the serving cart and inspected it. "There's a mark." Nia looked at the spotless silver surface. "Where, ma'am?" Celeste pointed to a reflection only she seemed able to see. "Right there. Do it again." Mara lowered her eyes, hiding a faint smile. Nia picked up the polishing cloth. "Of course." Celeste leaned closer. Her perfume was sweet enough to disguise the cruelty in her voice. "And tonight, stay away from Adrian unless he directly addresses you. He has enough responsibilities without staff inventing reasons to hover around him." Nia's hand stopped for half a second. "I have never hovered around Mr. Vale." "No." Celeste's smile sharpened. "Then you won't mind proving it." She turned and walked away before Nia could answer. At the bottom of the staircase, she nearly collided with Adrian Vale. He had entered through the side hall carrying a folder beneath one arm, his dark suit jacket open and his tie still loose. At 36, Adrian had the restrained confidence of someone accustomed to controlling boardrooms without raising his voice. But this morning, exhaustion sat plainly beneath his eyes. Celeste's expression transformed instantly. "There you are." She kissed his cheek. "I was beginning to think your company mattered more than your own engagement." "Today it does," Adrian replied, only half joking. "Someone tried to access the Veil Foundation's reserve account last night." Celeste's smile flickered. It lasted less than a second, but Nia saw it. "Probably some technical error," Celeste said smoothly. "You shouldn't let business ruin tonight." "It wasn't an error. The request used my father's old authorization code." Adrian's father had died 18 months earlier. The ballroom seemed to grow quieter, though the workers around them continued moving. Celeste touched Adrian's chest. "Then let your security team handle it." "I intend to." His gaze moved past her and settled on Nia. "Good morning, Nia." "Good morning, Mr. Vale." His eyes dropped to the frayed cuff of her uniform. "Didn't Mrs. Crane order new uniforms last month?" Before Nia could respond, Celeste laughed lightly. "Nia refuses everything offered to her. She's very proud." The statement sounded complimentary. It was not. Adrian studied Nia's face as though sensing the answer had been taken from her. "Make sure she gets a replacement," he told Celeste. Celeste's fingers tightened against his jacket. "Of course." Adrian moved toward the west corridor, but paused when he reached the doorway. "Nia, have you seen anyone near my father's study this week?" Celeste went completely still. Nia thought of Tuesday night. She had been carrying folded linens past the locked study when she heard voices inside. Celeste's voice had been one of them. The second belonged to a man Nia had never seen, speaking quietly about account access, transfer windows, and something that had to happen before midnight on the night of the engagement party. Nia had not heard enough to understand the whole conversation. But she had heard Celeste say one sentence clearly. "Once Adrian signs the foundation papers, he won't be able to stop us." Nia looked from Adrian to Celeste. Celeste's face remained beautiful and calm, but her eyes gave a silent warning. "No, sir," Nia answered carefully. "Not recently." Adrian nodded and left. Celeste waited until he had disappeared down the corridor. Then she approached Nia slowly. "You're a terrible liar," she whispered. Nia held her ground. "I answered his question." "You heard something." "I don't know what you mean." Celeste glanced around to make sure no one was close enough to listen. "My father has friends on the hospital board handling your sister's surgery." The words struck harder than a slap. Nia's face changed despite her effort to control it. Celeste smiled. "Yes, I know about Simone. I know the deposit is due next month. I also know how easily an operating date can disappear from a schedule." Nia lowered her voice. "Leave my sister out of this. Then stay out of my business." For the first time, Nia understood that Celeste was not merely jealous or cruel. She was afraid. Before Nia could answer, Mara hurried toward them carrying a velvet jewelry case. "Ms. Laurent," she said, breathless. "Your engagement bracelet isn't in the dressing room." Celeste looked at the empty case, then slowly turned toward Nia. The fear vanished from her face. Something colder replaced it. "How unfortunate," Celeste said. "And after I saw Nia near my room this morning." Nia stared at her. She had never entered Celeste's dressing room. But Celeste was already calling for security. And across the ballroom, hidden beneath the lower shelf of the silver serving cart, a diamond bracelet caught the morning light. Security arrived within seconds. 2 guards crossed the ballroom as workers pretended not to stare. Celeste stood beside the empty jewelry case, one hand pressed to her chest. Mara remained close behind her, eyes lowered, looking more nervous than surprised. "The bracelet was in my dressing room 20 minutes ago," Celeste said. "Nia was the only staff member working upstairs." "That is not true," Nia replied. "I never entered your room." Celeste turned to the guards. "Search the cart." Nia's stomach tightened. One guard crouched beside the silver trolley and pulled open the lower compartment. The diamond bracelet lay beneath a folded napkin. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Nia stared at it. She put that there. Celeste gave a soft, wounded laugh. Of course she did. The head of security, Mr. Hale, picked up the bracelet using a handkerchief. Ms. Brooks, you'll need to come with us. No, Nia stepped back. Check the cameras. I have not touched that bracelet. Celeste's expression sharpened for only an instant. The upstairs cameras were disabled for privacy while I was dressing. Nia looked directly at her. That had not been an accident. Before the guards could move, Adrian returned through the west corridor. What's happening? Celeste crossed to him immediately. My bracelet was found hidden in Nia's cart. Adrian looked at the bracelet, then at Nia. Did anyone actually see her take it? No one needed to, Celeste said. It was in her possession. It was planted, Nia said. Sir, please ask who disabled the cameras. Adrian's gaze shifted to Hale. The camera system was placed in privacy mode at Ms. Lawrence's request, Hale admitted. Celeste's jaw tightened. Because I was changing. Adrian was silent for a moment. Nia wanted to tell him everything. The conversation in the study, the threat involving Simone, the strange authorization code. But dozens of people were watching, and Celeste's warning about the hospital board still burned in her mind. Adrian finally said, No police. Not until we know what happened. Celeste turned toward him. You cannot be serious. I'm very serious. For the first time, anger flashed openly across her face. Adrian handed the bracelet back to Hale. Lock it in my office. Review every available camera from the service halls and entrances. Nia stays employed until there is proof. Nia barely had time to feel relieved. Then Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. The bank. Celeste's expression changed again. Adrian answered and walked away, listening as he disappeared toward the study. Celeste watched him go. Then she looked at Nia. Pantry. Now. Only Nia heard the order. Inside the service pantry, the ballroom noise faded behind thick wooden doors. Celeste closed them and turned the lock. You nearly ruined everything, she said. Nia kept her voice low. What are you planning to do with the foundation? Celeste stepped closer. You should be asking what I can do to your sister. If Simone loses that surgery because of you. What? Celeste interrupted. You'll accuse me. With what proof? You're already the maid who stole my bracelet. Nia's hands curled at her sides. Celeste smiled. By tonight, Adrian will sign revised foundation papers in front of the board. He thinks they authorize emergency security changes. In reality, they allow a temporary transfer of control during a cyber attack. To whom? Celeste did not answer, but her silence did. Your father, Nia whispered. Celeste's smile disappeared. Behind them the pantry handle moved. Both women froze. Mara stepped inside and quickly shut the door. We have a problem, she said. The bank blocked the first transfer. Celeste's face hardened. How? They flagged the authorization code. Adrian's father's signature profile is still attached to the account. Nia listened, hardly daring to breathe. Mara noticed her. Why is she here? Because she knows too much, Celeste said. Mara looked genuinely frightened. Then let her go. We can still stop this. Celeste turned slowly toward her assistant. You don't get to lose your nerve now. Nia saw it then. Mara was not merely helping Celeste. She was trapped by her too. A knock sounded from the corridor. Ms. Laurent. A staff member called. The jeweler has arrived. Celeste opened the door and stepped out, returning instantly to her polished public smile. Before leaving, she leaned close to Nia. You will work the engagement party tonight, she whispered. You will say nothing. And when Adrian signs those papers, you will smile like everyone else. Mara remained in the pantry. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Mara pressed a tiny brass key into Nia's palm. "It opens the cabinet in Mr. Vale's father's study," she whispered. "There's a second set of documents inside." "Why are you helping me?" Mara's eyes filled with panic. "Because Celeste promised this was fraud. She never told me someone might get hurt." Footsteps approached again. Mara moved quickly toward the door but paused. "Don't trust the head of security," she said. "He's the one who turned off the cameras." Then she disappeared into the corridor. Nia closed her fingers around the key. She now had proof that the bracelet had been planted, proof that the foundation was in danger, and one terrifying new question. If Mr. Hale was working for Celeste, who exactly was security protecting? By 7 o'clock, the Vale estate no longer looked like a home. It looked like a stage built for a lie. Crystal chandeliers burned above the ballroom while 200 guests moved beneath them in black tie and silk. Politicians, investors and foundation trustees raised champagne glasses to Adrian and Celeste, unaware that millions of dollars were about to change hands. Nia crossed the room with a silver tray balanced on one palm. Beneath the cuff of her lavender uniform, the brass key Mara had given her pressed against her skin. Adrian stood near the stage speaking with 3 board members. Celeste stayed close enough to touch his arm whenever a camera turned toward them. To the guests, they looked perfectly matched. But every few minutes, Adrian glanced at Nia. He knew she had hidden something that morning. Nia could also see Celeste watching those glances. At 8:15, the Master of Ceremonies announced that Adrian would sign the Foundation's Emergency Protection Agreement before the engagement toast. Applause swept through the ballroom. The papers would be signed in less than 40 minutes. Nia entered the service corridor and found Mara beside the linen room. "Celeste moved the signing forward," Mara whispered. "Her father's plane leaves before midnight." "Who else is involved?" "A man named Julian Cross." Nia recognized the name. Julian was Adrian's chief financial officer and had worked beside him for nearly 10 years. "He designed the transfer," Mara continued. "Celeste promised it was temporary. She said Adrian would never notice." "And you believed her?" Mara's face tightened. "She paid my mother's debts, then kept the records and threatened to accuse me of stealing." "Where is Julian?" "In the West Library. He has the final access device." Before Nia could ask more, Mr. Hale appeared at the far end of the corridor. "Nia," he called. "Ms. Laurent wants the champagne cart in the West Hall." His eyes dropped briefly to her apron pocket. "I'll bring it. Now." Nia pushed the cart toward the West Hall, then abandoned it outside the pantry when Hale turned to answer his radio. She slipped into the servants' staircase and climbed to the second floor. Adrian's father's study stood at the end of a quiet corridor, untouched since his death. Nia entered, locked the door and crossed to the cabinet behind the desk. The brass key fit. Inside were 2 folders, a sealed envelope and a small black drive. The first folder contained the papers Adrian was expected to sign. The language seemed harmless until Nia reached the final page. During a verified cyber attack, authority over the Vale Foundation's reserve would pass for 12 hours to Halcyon Asset Protection. She opened the second folder. Halcyon was not owned by Celeste's father. It belonged to Julian Cross. Nia's breath caught. Celeste was not using Julian to steal Adrian's fortune. Julian was using Celeste. The envelope contained copies of payments from Halcyon to Mr. Hale and a typed schedule. 8:50 p.m. Obtained signature. 9:05 p.m. Disable estate power and internal network. 9:08 p.m. Initiate reserve transfer. 9:15 p.m. Remove Celeste Laurent and all non-essential witnesses. Nia read the final line twice. Celeste believed she would leave wealthy. Julian planned to leave her behind as the obvious criminal. A sound came from the hallway. Nia photographed every page and slipped the black drive beneath her apron. The study door opened before she could move. Julian Cross stood there in a dark tuxedo, one hand resting on the handle. Mr. Hale entered behind him. I wondered how long it would take the maid to become curious, Julian said. Adrian will know before he signs. Julian smiled. Will he? Nia reached for her phone, but Hale seized her wrist. The device fell onto the carpet. The photographs are already backed up, she said. Julian checked the screen. There is no signal in this room. The walls were reinforced years ago. He deleted the images and put the phone in his pocket. Nia's hope collapsed, until she remembered the black drive still hidden beneath her apron. You are going downstairs, Julian said. You will serve champagne and remain silent. After Adrian signs, your sister's hospital deposit will be paid. And if I refuse? Hale stepped closer. Julian's voice stayed almost gentle. Then the bracelet will be the smallest accusation made against you tonight. They escorted her toward the service stairs. As they passed the West Library, Nia heard Adrian arguing with someone about his father's authorization code. Then Celeste appeared at the opposite end of the corridor. Her gaze moved from Julian to Hale, then to Nia. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely afraid. Why is she with you? Celeste asked. Julian smiled. Because, he said, our maid has just learned who is really taking the Veil fortune. For 3 seconds Celeste said nothing. The polished confidence she had worn all evening vanished as she stared at Julian. You told me the reserve would go to my father's holding company. I told you what you needed to hear, Julian replied. Celeste looked toward Nia. What did she find? Enough to become inconvenient. Footsteps sounded from the ballroom staircase. Adrian was coming closer. Julian's calm expression hardened. Hale, take Nia through the pantry. Celeste, return to the ballroom and keep Adrian occupied. Celeste did not move. What happens to me after the transfer? You board your father's plane. That isn't what the schedule says. Julian's eyes narrowed. Nia realized Celeste had seen the fear on her face and understood the truth. She read the documents, Celeste whispered. You planned to frame me. Adrian's voice carried from the corridor. Celeste. Julian stepped toward her. Smile, go downstairs and do exactly what we agreed. For once, Celeste looked less like a cruel fiancée and more like a woman finally seeing the trap she had helped build. Then Hale grabbed Nia's arm. Nia twisted away, knocking a decorative table against the wall. The crash echoed down the corridor. Nia, Adrian called. Hale dragged her through the service door before she could answer. Julian caught Celeste by the wrist and whispered something that drained the remaining color from her face. The service corridor was empty. Hale pushed Nia toward the silver cart waiting outside the pantry. Give me the drive. I don't have it. He searched her apron pocket and found nothing. Nia had slipped the drive beneath the loose seam of her sleeve while Julian was watching Celeste. Hale pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Nia backed away. You're going to handcuff me in the middle of an engagement party? No one will see you. Before he could reach her, Celeste entered the corridor. Leave us, she ordered. Hale laughed. You don't give orders anymore. Julian needs you near the electrical room. Adrian has asked security to check the network. Hale's radio crackled with Julian's voice confirming it. He shoved the handcuffs into Celeste's hand. Keep her quiet. Then he disappeared around the corner. Celeste stared at the cuffs. Nia held her gaze. You know Julian intends to blame everything on you. Be quiet. You planted the bracelet. You threatened my sister. You helped them gain access to Adrian's foundation. I said be quiet. But you didn't plan this part. Celeste's face twisted with panic and rage. You think that makes me innocent? No. It means you still have one chance to stop it. For a moment, Nia thought she had reached her. Then Adrian's voice sounded again, closer now. Celeste, where are you? Fear made the decision for her. Celeste seized Nia's wrist and snapped one cuff around it. Nia fought back, but Celeste slammed her against the cart and locked the second cuff through its steel handle. The cart rolled sharply, throwing Nia to the marble floor. Celeste grabbed the diamond bracelet from her clutch and placed it on the cart's top shelf. What are you doing? Nia asked. When Adrian finds you, he'll see a thief caught trying to escape. He already questioned the accusation. Then I'll tell him you attacked me after stealing confidential documents. Nia pulled at the cuff. The cart's wheel rattled but did not release her. Celeste crouched beside her. You should have stayed invisible. Nia looked directly into her eyes. And you should have asked why Julian needed the power cut. Celeste froze. He isn't only stealing the reserve, Nia continued. The blackout destroys the estate's internal records and locks the doors. Once the transfer finishes, You become the only person connected to the false authorization. Where is the proof? Hidden where your friends will never think to search. Celeste grabbed Nia's injured wrist and squeezed. Tell me, Nia cried out. The sound escaped through the service doors, faint beneath the orchestra. Celeste released her and stood quickly. Stay here. You can still warn Adrian. Celeste hesitated, but pride and fear won again. She turned toward the ballroom. Nia pulled desperately against the cuff. Help, she shouted. Music swallowed the word. She pushed the cart toward the pantry entrance, but one wheel had locked. Broken champagne glasses from the morning remained in a disposal tray beneath it. The movement sent them crashing across the floor. From the ballroom came applause. Adrian was being called to the stage. Nia looked at the clock above the pantry. 49. 1 minute until the signing. She screamed again. Please. Somebody help me. This time, footsteps stopped on the other side of the door. The service doors opened. Adrian stood in the corridor holding the unsigned foundation documents. His gaze moved from Nia's torn sleeve to the steel cuff around her wrist, then to the diamond bracelet displayed on the cart. Nia! He dropped the papers and rushed toward her. Who did this? Nia's voice shook. Celeste. Adrian knelt beside the cuff. Why? The bracelet was planted. Julian controls the company receiving the money. Hale is helping him, and the transfer begins when the power goes out. Adrian stared at her. Nia pulled the black drive from the torn seam of her sleeve and pressed it into his hand. This proves everything. From inside the ballroom, Celeste began the engagement toast. Adrian looked toward her voice, then back at Nia. That isn't the worst part, Nia whispered. Julian plans to lock everyone inside and erase the security records. At that exact moment, every chandelier in the Vale estate went dark. Darkness swallowed the corridor. Adrian unlocked the handcuff and helped Nia stand. Red emergency lights flickered along the walls while frightened voices rose from the ballroom. Nia pulled the black drive from her torn sleeve and pressed it into his hand. This contains the forged documents, Julian's shell company, and the payments made to Hale. Adrian connected it to his phone. The files opened immediately. Among them was something even worse. A life insurance amendment naming Celeste as beneficiary if Adrian died before their wedding. The blackout was not only covering a robbery. Julian had planned an accident. You need to stop the transfer, Nia said. I'll warn the guests. Adrian hesitated, but she was already moving toward the old service staircase. Inside the ballroom, 200 guests stood beneath dead chandeliers, using their phones for light. Julian remained near the stage, pretending the outage was a technical failure. Celeste stood beside the unsigned foundation papers, visibly shaken. Nia entered through the upper gallery. Don't let Adrian sign anything. The ballroom fell silent. She descended the staircase holding Celeste's bracelet. This was planted on my cart. Celeste handcuffed me after I discovered that Julian planned to steal the Vale Foundation reserve. Julian laughed coldly. She's frightened and confused. No, Celeste said. Every head turned toward her. She's telling the truth, Celeste admitted. I planted the bracelet. I threatened her sister's surgery. I helped Julian because I believed the money would be transferred to my father's company. Julian's face hardened. You have no idea what you're doing. For the first time tonight, Celeste whispered. I do. He reached for the access device in his jacket, but Hale rushed forward and grabbed him. The two men crashed into the signing table, scattering papers across the floor. At that moment the main doors opened. Adrian entered with police officers. Julian and Hale were restrained before they could escape. Adrian crossed directly to Nia. Are you hurt? My wrist will heal. His eyes fell on the bruises left by the cuff. It should never have happened. Celeste approached them, tears streaking her face. Adrian, Julian manipulated me. You framed Nia before he betrayed you, Adrian replied. You threatened her family because you believed your name mattered more than hers. He removed his engagement band and placed it beside the unsigned documents. The engagement is over. The investigation lasted months. Julian and Hale were charged with fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful confinement. Celeste cooperated with police but still faced consequences for framing and restraining Nia. Simone's surgery was successful 6 weeks later. Nia refused a personal reward. Instead, she asked Adrian to establish an emergency medical fund for every estate employee. A year later, the same silver cart stood in the ballroom during the fund's first charity event. No longer carried champagne. Held medical aid applications. Above it hung the broken handcuff beneath a small plaque. No voice in this house will ever be locked away again. Nia stood beside it as Adrian joined her. Do you still hate that cart? He asked. She smiled. Not anymore. And when Nia spoke that evening, the entire room listened.